gymnasium.
Elections Administrator Cliff Rogers repeated the excuses he's given for closing Belle Morris Elementary School as a voting location. Things got heated and interesting when I challenged those reasons in public forum.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission. My name is Mark Harmon. I live at 1714 North Hills Boulevard. Was pleased to represent this area as a county commissioner. And up until, well, at least at the start of this year, I could say that I proudly was assigned to vote at Belle Morris Elementary School, a fine voting location where people have voted for 6 decades without problem. Before you, I have given a packet or petition. It includes comments that I will reference, and so I wanted to get it to you early. You will note, Commissioner Francis' math wasn't quite correct, there are 146 persons who have signed a petition to reopen Belle Morris Elementary School as a voting location. That was as of yesterday when I put the packet together. 17 more have signed the petition since then, and 11 outside of the county. Okay, so we have, in effect, 163 Knox County residents telling you to reconsider this decision. Let me just review 6 key areas here in very quick succession so we understand the real issues before us. The first and most important one is lack of community involvement in this decision. Okay? We have active neighborhood associations, active neighborhood listservs, active councilmen and commissioners. There was not the community involvement which would have revealed the strong community opposition to this choice. Secondly, access has not been an issue. We have had testimony from the election administrator that it has not been an issue. We have one passed along secondhand email complaint in which the name of the person was not gotten correctly. By the way, his name is Harold Midas. I see him frequently walking around our neighborhood. He takes a regular constitutional walk. When I found him at a recent event and asked him, he said his intention never was to close the precinct. So access is a bogus issue. There has not been a problem. There is handicapped access. And as Administrator Rogers has admitted, Carnes, Bluegrass, we might add Pond Gap, Bearden, all have issues. We didn't close them. We shouldn't close this one. Distance. Much was made of the fact that Larry Cox Senior Rec Center is less than a mile away. But of course, that discriminates against compact inner-city neighborhoods who can more easily lose their voting locations under that standard. Furthermore, at least 4 pairs of voting locations noted in your packet are less than the distance from Belle Morris to Larry Cox. Parking. Parking, also, you did not get the complete picture. Belle Morris has sufficient parking. Even when times get a little tight at Belle Morris, there's a church parking lot directly across the street that voters use. Belle Morris never has a parking problem. On the other hand, when I was at Larry Cox on the August 2nd election, from 8 a.m. until noon, watching a third of the voting hours, what did I see? I saw that within a couple of occasions, we came within 3 or 4 spots of filling up the joint. During a low turnout, filling up the immediately accessed lane. I don't count the on-street parking because that's a crowded street. And you certainly can't count the library parking because the library needs it. Right? The parking problem there is severe. When we get triple the number of voters at that location, it will prove to be a problem. We cannot assume otherwise. So, when the stated reasons make no sense, that's when people turn to the unstated reasons. And note the rather obvious, that as you look at your packet, you find that the Belle Morris precinct, compared to the county, is roughly 20 percentage points more for Democratic candidates at the top of the ticket, and that Larry Cox is 10 percentage points more. And you're crunching them together and making them inconvenient. That is discouraging voting and making voting more difficult, something we should not be doing. At the local level, these 2 precincts have a strong record of supporting local Democrats, including Harry Tyndall, Amy Broyles, myself. And suddenly you remember, oh yes, there's a state house race, an open contested seat here, in which one of the candidates, Gloria Johnson, happens to be someone whose voting precinct was Belle Morris, a home precinct of one of the candidates being disrupted. That has nothing to do with it, never would. Let's be realistic. Even if you don't believe that in your heart and soul, you have bogus reasons asserted for this, and people will believe the worst. The only way to correct this, the only way to do what's right, is to reinstate Belle Morris as a voting location, because otherwise people will wonder, what's going on here? Why? This was not necessary. This is inconvenient. And do it in time for the November election, because that will clear away that suspicion. Because that suspicion will linger upon this body and taint it. You have an oath of office. It's also represented in here. It says that you will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of your office. If you do not reinstate Belle Morris as a voting location, voters, especially the 163 who signed this petition, will wonder if those are merely words on paper or if there's a serious commitment here.
I've got a couple of questions. Petitioners are actually voted Belle Morris, or did vote Belle Morris.
You can look them up. You have the registration records. I would say a significant number of them do. And all of the 163 are from Knox County. Your job is to represent all of Knox County, Democrats, Republicans, etc.
I'm just asking you a question.
Yeah.
You don't know yourself.
I did not look up immediately. I know most of them have the 37917 zip code, which would indicate to me that a large percentage, if not a majority, are from the area. And many of the people who gather around are from the area.
Mr. Harmon, I understand you have strong feelings about this issue, and I certainly commend anybody who takes an active role in their community. We need more people like that. Our community, our county, our city would be better if we had more people interested in these sorts of things. Where I have an issue, Mr. Harmon, are these bald accusations against Mr. Rogers that you have made, and I've got friends who receive your listserv. I know the things that you've said about me. I know the things you've said about Mr. Francis, not necessarily you, but your group, and about Ms. Stuart. All uncalled for, and you talk about this sense that partisan politics played a role in this. Sir, unless you have some proof of that, you're the one that's fueling that fire. This was a bipartisan vote. Completely bipartisan vote. And I don't think Ms. Stuart is in line with me and Mr. Heagerty and Mr. McNutt. Mr. Francis certainly knew about this issue back in March. He didn't call Mr. Rogers or the staff and say, hey, we shouldn't do this. Politics had nothing to do with this. And in fact, you mentioned Commissioner Broyles earlier in your report. Just 4 years ago, Commissioner Broyles herself was supporting Mr. McKay's efforts to close not only Belle Morris, but Larry Cox, and have one voting location in all of North Knoxville.
I assume you're referencing the merge voting plan from Commissioner McKay, which would apply to the entire county and not just our neighborhood, correct?
But there's no distinction. The facility would be closed. So can you please tell me any factual proof that you have to support that this man sitting to my right, who I've known for almost 20 years and who may have the highest level of integrity of any person I know, why he's lying to not only our body but to the public? What facts do you have to support that?
The facts were in my presentation, and it was not about the person, it was about the arguments, and the arguments are false. You also asked a question.
What evidence do you have that those arguments are false, Mr. Harmon?
60 years of solid operation, and the one complaint traces back to a person who says he doesn't want the precinct closed.
But he admits that he made the complaint.
Oh yeah, you had an email that you sort of passed around, but it became an excuse to close. And as far as your point about partisanship, I quote a Mr. Bob Bowman in an email. No county GOP leader has expressed any concerns. Feel free to call Mr. Francis or Ms. Stuart and discuss the item further with them. Obviously, 4 to 5 months after the vote is a bad time to make any changes. I encourage you to have them get more engaged with their county Democratic Party leaders about these matters in the future. That is a partisan thing, and you wrote it.
Well, I didn't. I wrote it in response to the little press conference that you and Gloria Johnson had at Belle Morris.
And several others.
We have had polling locations closed and moved ever since I've been on the commission. And a lot of times people get upset. They don't like change. But generally what happens, Mr. Harmon, is that
It's Dr. Harmon.
People come down to our meeting. They either call the administrator and come down and meet with us and talk through these issues, and in certain instances we have moved polling place back. But they've actually stood up, had a spine, and come down and talk with us. They've not had press conferences. They've not hid behind blogs and online petitions. They've actually shown some character and stood up to assert their constituents' position. You've not done that. You've never, until this day, never came down to address this with us one-on-one. And we're willing to talk about it, Mr. Harmon.
If you'll check your records, I previously attended election commission meetings, but
But
furthermore,
you didn't raise this issue, did you?
No, I was
The only
speaking
last
to another
issue, the
issue.
last issue you raised was you implored us to put Shelley Breeding on the ballot, and not only us,
But let me
one,
take
I can list about 4 Democratic judges who said you're wrong.
Well, Mr.
So,
Bowman,
I just want to know
resent-
what facts that you
Hold on,
have.
Mr. Bowman.
What facts do you have that this man was lying to us? That's all I want to know.
no one
librarians
said
did
lying.
not
He
want
said,
to
I
choke
said
their
that his
facility.
claims are false, that he's making false claims, that he doesn't seem to understand the totality. He never mentioned, for example, the cross-the-street church parking. He overstates the value of the library. And the librarians do not want you choking their facility. These things are part of the record.
Librarian?
Yes, I go
When did you talk to the librarian?
About-
Who was the person you
the
spoke to?
desk librarian about 10 days ago.
Okay, what's her name?
I'll be happy to get her name for you. But in the meantime, let me respond. Because there was a personal attack. And apparently this must be a personal attack thing. That was the tenor of your email, and that's the tenor of your thing.
Certainly
I am
started-
standing
certainly
here,
started by
excuse me,
you.
Mr. Bowman. I am standing here, spine straight. I have done the things that citizens can and should do. Ask their government for redress of grievances. Hold a public meeting. Write a public column. Create a public petition and present it. There is nothing wrong with that and everything right. And for you to assert that there's anything wrong with that, or the order of that or something else, is an insult to citizens and their activity. And you should be ashamed and apologize.
Have you ever heard, sir, that you can get more flies with honey than vinegar?
Yes, and I keep wondering when you're going to learn that.
No, I want you. I mean, why wouldn't you be a man and come down and meet with Mr. Rogers
Now,
about
there
this
again
first?
is, I have talked to Cliff on the phone. We have spoken about these matters. You are assuming facts not there, which is a very bad thing to do.
Well, did Mr. Rogers, did he call you after the change
We never
back
had
in
any
March?
discussions until this week. The only other conversation I ever had with Mr. Harmon was about Shelley Breeding.
We had a previous phone call, you may have forgotten, and we had
We
two
had
this, and we had
two
two
this
this week.
week.
Two this week as one previously.
I don't remember the one previous except about Shelley Breeding.
No, I called and you gave the whole handicap thing, and I said
I
I'd look
have no
into it.
recollection of that.
It happened.
Well,
Well, I was going to interject that Mr. Harmon has been in contact with me pretty frequently since, I guess,
Dr. Harmon.
excuse me, Dr. Harmon. I should know that. My parents are PhDs. They're sticklers for that too. So, Dr. Harmon.
Thank you.
We've been in touch, quite a bit, just to, I guess, for you to express your concerns about this whole process.
Mhm.
And I want to say that I have to agree with one of Bob's earlier statements that no, I do not always sit here and agree with that side. When we had the discussion about Belle Morris back in March, as I told you and others, I was here and questioned the whole issue itself, and I walked away with the understanding that there was a problem for handicapped people, and that was the reason I voted the way I did. But I guess overall, you're welcome to express your opinion. We all have opinions. You're welcome to come anytime. Anybody who's here for the first time is welcome to come at any time. We welcome your opinions. And I really don't have an issue with what Cliff presented that day, because to me, as I said, that was my concern, that a handicapped person was not being allowed to have proper access to voting, and that's the way I understood it that day. But again, anybody is welcome anytime to communicate with anybody on this board.
And I appreciate the courtesy with which you've always responded to my inquiries. Genuinely, and none of this digging in heels and defending, without thinking. You've always been open-minded about this, and I appreciate it.
No, Mr. Harmon, you're always welcome to personally come down and address this body at any time. I'm not trying to dissuade you
Well,
from
I know
doing
that
that.
as a
In
right
fact,
citizen.
I want to encourage you to do that, because I think dialogue is far more important one-on-one than how I viewed other things that have transpired since March of 2012.
8 a.m. meetings are always tough. That's why we did the online petition to make sure that 163 Knox County people told you you should change your position.